I'm curious if you've got anything, you've uncovered anything that can help us bet into this market. But I'm looking at
Mhm.
how this has gone down, and it's always very, very tight at the top. It's a difficult market to win. More times than not, it's a tie, which means that 10 to 1 you have isn't going to be a 10 to 1. This past year,
Mhm.
everyone references Dak Prescott sucks because he led the league in interceptions. The part they don't tell you is that he also tied with Davis Mills. That's not good. That's not giving an excuse. I'm just saying it wasn't Dak alone. He had
Right.
15, and by the way, three other quarterbacks right behind him with 14. Cousins, Carr, Josh Allen each had 14 picks, but people love to beat down on Dak because he, quote, led the league in interceptions, and Davis Mills doesn't count because he sucks. The season before, it was also a tie. Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, each with 17. A few years back, Wentz and Drew Lock tied at 15. So I'm wondering, should we even bet into this market? Because what looks like a very strong number, if you do hit it, it's probably going to be cut in half or maybe even worse.
When it comes to predicting interceptions, Dr. Ed Fang, friend of the show, my former boss at the Power Rank, he has looked into this and has conducted a deep dive when it comes to how to predict interception totals in the NFL. And if you only look at interception rate, well, it's not very predictive from one season to the next. However, if you look at bad ball rate, which is the sum of interceptions and passes defended, balls knocked away, tipped, all that stuff, that is
Mm-hmm.
more predictive from one season to the next. Bad ball rate, all of these bad passes divided by the total number of passes. And so the idea is if you have a bad ball rate in one season, then it's much likelier you will have that same bad ball rate the following season compared with, say, interceptions. And look, if you have a high bad ball rate, but very few interceptions, well, these things do regress to the mean ultimately, and you'll probably have more interceptions the following year. So is that a process that you can get behind, Joe?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm curious which names certainly pop there. In addition to that, I was looking at a PFF piece earlier this offseason on the unluckiest quarterbacks, and Dak actually pops there. So he's going to be talked about a lot. And according to PFF, 9 of his interceptions since 2016 have stemmed from drops. That is tied for the most in the NFL. And some of the names that have been unlucky that I probably wouldn't think that's going to continue, they have Joe Burrow as the unluckiest quarterback. Also in their top 3, Justin Herbert and Mac Jones. So a few names to keep in mind. When I throw that at you, what do you consider like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, those are guys that I would avoid that's unlikely to continue, or maybe it does continue like it has for Dak in a large sample.
Without getting too deep into the weeds here, I do think that when you are throwing to a receiver where the margin of error is really really small, sometimes it's the receiver's fault. To answer your question as far as bad luck goes, I don't think it's something that I want to bet into. I'd rather bet on a quarterback who had, say, good luck, but can throw a rather high bad ball rate, and then things are going to regress for them. I'm sure there will be hashtag narratives out there that will explain that away, but ultimately, this is the trend that I want to be looking for. And so Daniel Jones is someone who comes to mind, who's 60 to 1 in this market, by the way. He was one of the luckier quarterbacks, but chances
Really?
are things will start to regress for him. And maybe that's a good place to start when thinking about examples of someone with a higher bad ball rate, but a lower interception count from a season ago. When you are trying to predict conference champions, chances are if you're going to the SEC or the Big Ten, all you're doing is looking at favorites. If you're going down the board, it probably won't be profitable for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt. But the purpose of this exercise is to try to find value. And I think we should also mention that, listen, if there isn't much value, if you're just going to be wasting a lot of money, taking some of these 10, 15 to 1 shots, that we should mention that as well. I think we should start in a conference that we have found value throughout much of
Mhm.
the offseason. And let's stay in the Midwest here by me and talk about Wisconsin. And even
Okay.
though they've been the buzzy team this offseason and they have two of the top 4 favorites for the title in that conference, Wisconsin Badgers have value, and they're still sitting at almost 10 to 1. A coaching upgrade with Luke Fickell, great hire with Longo as the OC. You've gone on record, talked about how much of an upgrade it is at quarterback. Wisconsin always searching for that quarterback. Well, now they've got Tanner Mordecai, and they are a team that has always been known for the great offensive line play, and they've got 4 returning starters, so they're expected to be strong up front as well. So we like Wisconsin. Are you still there as the season is about to kick off for the Badgers?
I'm not actually. I'm not
Okay.
because yeah. To me, I think when you're talking about conference winners in general, I think the value is going to be those conferences that don't get as much play. You're looking at Power Five, Big 12, Pac 12. Maybe you can find some value there, but in the Big 10, the more I look at Michigan, Ohio State, the more I look at those talent rankings, I go, who's going to knock them off? I think Penn State's the only team
Yeah.
that can make an argument, but Big Ten, SEC, ACC, it's chalk. I don't know outside of like the top 2, top 3 in those conferences if anybody can really contend. And, I know I hear the argument, well, schedule matters. Yeah, it does. But at the end of the day, you still have to be talented enough to win the title game. And I don't see it. I just don't,
Right.
even though I like what Wisconsin has done. I think you want to take an over win total on them? Fine by me. If you want to take a long shot for Mordecai to win the Heisman, I think that's great. But I think you also have to buck a couple of Heisman trends in order for that to make sense. And I'm just not willing to do that. So, no, I can't back the Badgers to win the conference. If there is a play to be made down the board in the Big 12, I would argue for Kansas at 30 to 1. They have a lot of experience coming back. The schedule is fairly favorable. It would make one heck of a story given where they were just a few years ago to where they can be now. And I think they had a little bit of bad luck a season ago. But if you want to take a flyer on a dark horse in the Big 12, I would recommend Kansas. NFL MVP. And before we give our picks, let's talk about what the public's doing per BetMGM with their
Mm.
insights. The highest ticket percentage belongs to Jalen Hurts at close to 15%. Highest handle goes to Pat Mahomes at close to 16%. The biggest liability for the book is Jalen Hurts. Of course, Pat Mahomes is the odds on favorite to win this honor and repeat as the NFL's most valuable player. But, Joe, when you look at what the public is doing, they're sort of looking at last year's Super Bowl and figuring that the 2 best quarterbacks made it there, and perhaps are a little bit torn as to which one will win the award this year.
That's how the NFL works. It's just a repeat of last year. Whatever the 2
Always.
1 seeds,
Always.
the 2 teams that met in the Super Bowl last year, those quarterbacks. And wasn't this the odds most of the year where Hurts was the favorite and Mahomes was second most of the year?
Oh,
I think it was.
mm, I don't know. I
No,
thought
once
Mahomes
Hurts.
was the odds on. I think Hurts maybe have supplanted him for a little bit, but then he got hurt, and then Mahomes ran away with it. But
Well, that was the
I want to
last
say
few weeks,
Mahomes was
but I'm
leading.
saying before that. No?
No, I think it was
Hurts wasn't the
Mahomes.
favorite earlier? Okay. Okay.
No, I think Mahomes was.
Okay. Either way, I mean, Hurts, Mahomes, Hurts. That's repeat of last year, right? That's how it's gonna work.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's not what Nate Tice said yesterday. He's like, let's chill out on this
Yes, sir.
Hurts MVP stuff. So I found that pretty interesting. Um, yeah, I could listen. I can't knock a Mahomes MVP take. I can't. I can knock the odds that do you want to bet on 6 to 1? You can. He's going to win another MVP. He might win multiple MVPs before it's all said and done, more. But I can't knock it. But yeah, I can't say that I have either name circled for what I'm looking at this year. But yeah, of course, either or both could win another one.
The process
Mhm.
that I used for narrowing this field to 7 and then to 4 to 3 guys, Dak Prescott kept kept surviving basically. Like,
Wow.
really good guys kept getting filtered out, and Dak Prescott was still there. Then I looked at overall team strength, like you were talking about, and I'm like, well, shoot, this team could finish as the winner of the NFC East. And if they do that, then they could get the 1 seed or the 2 seed, something like that. I look at this and say, goodness gracious, Dak Prescott is definitely a part of this conversation. Let me get to what my process is here and then see if maybe I also, tag a couple of guys who you like here. So
Okay.
when it comes to MVP at the end of the season, total EPA is incredibly predictive. We talk about this when it comes to MVP and Cy Young in baseball, where you look at Fangraphs WAR and you go, okay, whoever's leading that stat probably is winning the award. Total EPA in football basically works the same way. It's not every year, but almost always, if you have an EPA lead over everyone else, especially a significant one, you're winning this honor. So then the question is, who's going to lead the league in expected points added? Well, my question is, okay, well, who can get this in chunks? Who's really good at intermediate and deep throws? That's passes greater than 10 air yards. So I looked at the last 3 years and looked at qualifying quarterbacks as far as leaders in EPA per play on such passes. There are a couple of guys here who I don't like for MVP. Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson, Matt Stafford. I sort of threw those guys out and said, okay, there are too many reasons why they can't do it this year. But the other 4, I think, are legitimate. Pat Mahomes, Joe
Mhm.
Burrow, Jalen Hurts, and Dak Prescott. And I think my final list really looks at those 4 the most seriously.